Hi guys. So about a week and a half ago, I built this compost pile here that's under this tarp. And I thought I'd show you what a compost pile should look like after about a week and a half if you keep turning it, and also maintenance tips to keep your compost moving along nice and quickly so that you get your finished compost sooner. Let's just get right into it. And here's the compost pile after about a week and a half. As you can see, it's a lot smaller than it was when I first built it, and it's also a lot more broken down. If I reach in here and pull it out, it's quite a bit slimier than it was, I will admit that, but it's also much further along. As you can see, there's not really a whole lot of green, except for this, but that's a leaf that just fell in there. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of greenery left. There's not a lot of, you can still tell what a lot of the material was. I can still look at it and say oh, that was a stem, that was a leaf. There's probably a couple of melon rinds still in here I might be able to recognize. But a lot of the softer stuff is broken down already. And that tells me that this pile is moving along at exactly the rate I want it to. Now to show you guys how I turn the pile. Alright, first things first, when you're getting ready to turn the compost pile. I have the stake in here, and what that stake is for, I like to pull it on out and feel it. The metal is kind of cold, the metal is not that warm at all. It's fairly cold, which means that I know that that pile is not a hot compost pile anymore. And that's what I try to aim for. I try to aim for a hot compost pile. Metal stakes like these are a great way to tell if you have a hot compost pile without sticking your hand in the pile itself. And also if you don't have a thermometer or something that you can use. Next step to turning your pile, grab your trusty pitchfork. Oh, hello, leaf. Grab your trusty pitchfork and just start breaking into the pile, starting at the top. I've laid out a tarp here on the ground to catch all of the bits from the pile so that I can make sure that they all get right back into the pile when I'm done. I like to start from the top of the pile and work my way down, piling it at one side of the tarp, working my way across. And you'll see why in just a minute. Alright, and there you go. That is the pile dug out and laid out on the tarp. And this is a great opportunity to see the inside of the pile and see how well it's breaking down. As you can tell, it's not broken down a whole lot. You can still tell a lot of what this stuff is. But I'm noticing that none of the kitchen scraps I put in there originally are visible anymore, which is a good sign. This is also the time when you turn your pile to add in new materials. I generally like to add in new materials for about the first 2 to 3 weeks, but after that I really try not to add in any more. After that I just like to let the pile break down as I turn it. Behind me I have the materials that I'm going to be adding in today. I've got a big old bucket of grass clippings and some more kitchen scraps. Let me show you how I reassemble the pile. To reassemble the pile, I like to start at the side of the tarp that had the stuff from the top. And I'm going to put that on the bottom of the pile now. And I'm just going to work my way over until it's all back in. You're just going to shove your pitchfork in. And just kind of sprinkle it on in there. And I also kind of like to jiggle my pitchfork around to break up any clumps and to get a lot of new fresh air into the pile to keep it from going anaerobic and stinky. After you've got a good couple of inches down, you're going to turn over to your piles of new stuff, and you're going to add it in. Exactly the same way as you would for a new pile. Layer of grass clippings. And a layer of kitchen scraps. And then shovel more compost on. And you're just going to keep doing that until all of the old material and all of the new material has been reincorporated into the pile. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to be right back. And there you have it. That is how you turn and add new material to a compost pile. Only thing I have left to do is put the stake back in so that I can monitor the temperature. Which is as simple as just shoving it through the top. There's a big hunk of frozen material in the middle of that, so the stake's not going to go all the way through. But it's in deep enough. And now I just want to share a couple of tips with you. I mentioned a hot compost pile earlier, and the reason why I want my pile to be hot is to kill off any seeds of like weeds from the grass clippings, or from the kitchen scraps that make it in here, so that I don't have rogue tomato plants sprouting everywhere in my garden. And the way you make your compost hot is by having an even mix of green materials, such as grass clippings, and brown materials, such as leaves and dried out weeds that you've pulled from your garden. I forget what the exact ratio of green to brown is supposed to be in a pile. I know there is a ratio, but I forget it. But it's very easy to just kind of experiment and tinker until you make a hot pile. If you build a pile how it is here, when you first turn it, on the first couple of days that you turn it, just simply monitor the temperature by either touching the compost or getting a metal stake like this one here. If it's steaming and hot, congratulations, you have a hot compost pile. If it doesn't get hot within the first 2 or 3 days, then there's obviously something that you need to do to change in your pile. It's very easy to find out what you need to do. For example, when I first made this pile, when I first turned it, I noticed that there were a lot more leaves than I realized I had put in there. And over the first couple of days, I continued to monitor that. It didn't get hot at all. So what I did is I went back to the pile of grass clippings that I had, and I pulled 2 5-gallon buckets of grass clippings and incorporated them into the pile. And over 2 days, I incorporated 20 gallons of grass clippings into the pile, and the next day, the pile was steaming hot. Another thing that you need to notice is whether or not your pile is dry. If your pile's too dry, it's also not going to heat up. You want it to be like a damp sponge. If you squeeze the material and get a couple of drops out of it, I don't know if you could see those drops, but if you could squeeze the material and get a few drops, then congratulations, your pile is wet enough. However, if you pick up material and you're barely touching it and there's already water dripping out of it, your pile's way too wet. And you need to leave it uncovered on a couple of sunny days to let it dry out a little. But if you follow these tips and adjust accordingly, then you should get a nice hot compost pile. And don't worry about there not being enough leaves and too many grass clippings. Grass clippings, because of their high nitrogen content, heat up perfectly fine on their own. Alright, and there you have it. that is how you turn a compost pile, or at least how I do it, and that is a few tips that I myself have discovered to get your compost pile nice and toasty and breaking down much quicker. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed this little two-part compost series. If you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments box below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.